All right, ladies and gentlemen. Shavana, shall we start?
Yes, please.
Awesome. It's time for it's 8 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. So it's time for our weekly interview format show with Mavin Magic. And today I'm really happy to bring up a topic which is a little bit more familiar to me than others, which is technology and software and data and all those cool things that I did my education in. I'm not there anymore, but I was there. I used to be there when I had more hair on my head. And our guest today happens to be a person from that domain. His name is Ibrahim Khatri. And let me quickly introduce Ibrahim Khatri to the people who will be watching this video later. Ibrahim Khatri is the founder and CEO of PrivEzi Solutions, a digital governance company helping financial institutions and fintechs build trust, compliance, and resilience in the age of digital finance. With over 2 decades of experience across financial services, data privacy, and technology risk, Ibrahim has advised leading organizations including NPCI, Citigroup, BNY Mellon, Zurich Insurance, and Qatar National Bank, where he served as Data Protection Officer, DPO, leading GDPR implementation and data governance across multiple geographies. Before founding PrivEzi, he held leadership roles at EY, KPMG USA, and PwC, guiding global clients on AI, governance, cybersecurity, and regulatory compliance. His work bridges the gap between innovation and accountability, enabling organizations to operationalize privacy and risk frameworks that power digital transformation securely. Ibrahim, you also have a couple of certifications and fellowships that maybe you could tell us more about that. Let's start with that, the fellowships and other things that you've done.
I thank you, Sai, for having me, and thank you, Mavin Magic, for having me on this podcast. So I have a certification in IIPP, Fellow of Information Privacy. So IIPP is the world's oldest not-for-profit privacy organization. They certify professionals who want to get ahead in their career in data privacy. Uh, it's based in every country that I know of, and they offer three different distinct tracks. Right, one is the management of privacy. How do you manage data privacy programs in organization? The other one is CIPP, which is Certified Information Privacy Professional, which actually talks about the law, what the law actually requires from organizations. And the third thing is technologists, right? How do you actually implement those technologies? So those are the three main tracks: CIPP, CIPT, and CIPM. So in fact, back in 2018, when IIPP was just coming into India, we became their certified training partners in India. But then I quit that business and I focused more on the software business. But that business has really become really big now because data privacy since then is become an act.
Right, and you're also a fellow in information privacy. Can you tell us a bit about that?
So, Fellow of Information Privacy is part of IIPP. So, if you have two out of the three tracks, if you have certification in two of them, you basically become a Fellow of Information Privacy. So these are really hard, long exams, but it's really interesting if you like the subject of data privacy and technology, right?
So I'm curious about two things. One, you have a CIPP, the one who is in privacy practice, which is the law part of your certification and your fellowship. Do you have to be a lawyer, or do you have to have an inclination to what was your background that pushed you towards at least at this stage of your company, you were focused on the CIPP and implementation. So what pushed you towards law?
So, and I'll be extremely honest that most of the organizations that today have start with their privacy journey is because of the regulation. There is a regulation, and organizations, if they don't comply, there's a fine, right? So that's the main driver. The law is the driver. No organization actually wants to, take care of privacy. They're not self-started and they want to like really when they get up and say, I want to take care of data privacy. It's the regulation and the huge amount of fine that is required, right? Now, uh, GDPR became the first law, right? And every country, GDPR, which is General Data Protection Regulation, which is a European privacy regulation, was the first regulation that came into effect, became the first law, and every country basically, basically used it, put a regional learning to it. But if you don't understand the law, then you can't really implement it, right? So it's very important for you to understand what the law is, because end of the day, you know, privacy professionals and technologists might actually, implement the privacy program. But let's say, for example, if there is a breach in the organization, and an individual insurance company or an individual takes the organizations to court, then it's actually going to be the lawyers, right, who will represent them in the court of law. So it's very important for, if you don't understand the law, then it's very difficult to implement the privacy program. You don't have to be a professional, but at least you should be able to, like, at least talk to a lawyer, right? What they're talking, where they're coming from, what their thought process is. We're not trying to be lawyers here, but we need to understand the law really well, so you can at least understand why you're doing certain things.
So you as an individual would be the bridge between the legal system, which is going to enforce the rules, and what the company understands about their needs or their responsibilities with regard to the legal system. You'd be the one translating. If the law says your data should be encrypted, so what does that mean from an implementation standpoint? You'd be converting the law language into implementation language. Is that what it is?
Yes, that's what it means, right? I mean, that's and the law has a lot of interpretations, but then we try to come up with innovative methods to basically how to implement that legal language into a solution, right? And again, law can be interpreted into multiple ways. So there are different solutions that come up with different innovative solutions to tackle the same problem, right? But yeah, in a sense, what you said is right. I mean, we take the law and see how can we basically comply with it in an easier manner.
And GDPR, I know you mentioned GDPR already, because I was going to bring it up myself. I'm glad that you did. So you've opened the conversation about GDPR. When GDPR was first being discussed, it was considered to be very onerous. Like, why companies outside the EU, why would they have to do so much work just to comply with a law that is only applicable to, say, the EU? So how is that resistance to privacy laws, which started in, say, 2012, 2013, because GDPR was in the horizon. We could already see GDPR coming by 2015, 2016. There was a lot of resistance to privacy protections, and innovation was being stifled, and people are being like, this is going to put a lot of cost burden on us. But then eventually GDPR did come into effect, and the landscape has changed. So how was it, like, where were we before? And maybe you could walk us through, say, the 2012, 2010 to 2000. So the internet from, say, 2005 to 2015, and then from 2015 when the law started coming in about privacy and all those things, and how the internet has evolved along the way, or the structures around privacy and the thinking around privacy has evolved from, say, 2005 until 2025. If you could walk us through that.
First I'll take it from a European context, right? So Europe has always been very, very any human right, they have really been at the forefront of it, right? Because they actually feel for human emotions more than anybody else, quote unquote, right? So they're the first ones who actually, they've had privacy regulations far before even from the 1980s. They've been after World War. When the World War One, World War Two, World War Three, they had certain kind of privacy regulations, and then they had electronic privacy regulations. India, on the matter of fact, has only IT Act from 2011, 2012, and that's also very outdated, right? So there's a need to basically update those regulations, and we are going to come up with the India Digital Act. But I'll stick to the topic of data privacy and data protection. So even though Europe always had some kind of privacy regulations for their own organizations, GDPR was the first regulation that basically said that if you are processing, personal data of its citizens, no matter where you are located, you basically need to comply with this regulation. So they always had privacy regulations, but they basically just took this and they applied it, blankly to all countries or all organizations. Doesn't matter where you're basically deciding, right? As long as you are basically, even if you're processing 10 European Union citizens, customers' data, you'll have to comply with this regulation. And the fines were extremely high for this regulation, right? That's why every country started taking it very seriously. And then what happened was that, so it got passed somewhere around 2016, and then organizations got 2 years to basically comply, right? Because you can imagine that Europe being very, very mature with privacy any which ways, they got 2 years and they still basically had a hard time to comply with it. On the other hand, it became like a cookie cutter approach. Every country basically used that as a Bible and came up with their own privacy regulation. So 90% of every privacy regulation that a country has is basically taken inspiration from GDPR.
Okay, so then why aren't Indian companies just telling the government, listen, just like a lot of Indian pharmaceuticals, they take their standards from the FDA. We don't really do a lot of cutting edge research on pharmaceuticals in India today. I mean, that's the fact of the matter. So they say we just comply with FDA and that assume that if FDA is saying something is okay, then it's mostly going to be okay for India also. Why aren't Indian companies saying the same thing to in the Indian government and saying, don't put more rules on us, we'll just follow what GDPR says?
See, um, so India, so first of all, I think especially India, right? I mean, you can't just basically take a cookie cutter approach and take a lift and drop kind of approach. You basically have to basically tweak it about 10 to 15%, right? So, uh, where I think GDPR is more from a perspective of giving control to the customers of how their data is actually managed. Indian DPDP Act is more leaning towards accountability of the data, right? Uh, Keeping organizations accountable of how they are managing the data of the customers. Are they really being trustworthy? Are they really being accountable? And are they really being transparent? So there's a more focus on that. There are organizations in India will need to go through an annual audit, right? Appoint a independent auditor, and they will need to basically go through an annual audit on an annual basis, right? And then the regulators, how you have a financial audit, right? Every year, same way, this independent auditor, the regulator is basically going to come in and basically do annual audits, right? So these are not very those concepts. So India has become a little bit, has tried to be a little bit innovative, right, in its own approach. But in general, I'm talking about the framework, right? The framework is basically pretty much the same.
I see. So, okay, could you just also give us the expansion for, you said GDPR is General Privacy
General
Protection?
data, uh, General Data Protection Regulation,
So
GDPR.
that's GDPR. What is DPDP? If you could tell us that.
Digital Personal Data Protection Act. And why digital? Because we only care about this regulation only talks about data that's actually been taken from the customer digitally. So if you have basically gone somewhere, given the same data, but on a physical format, it's out of scope of the regulation. So this is only digital data that's collected digitally.
And how much of Indian, what percentage, in your opinion, of the Indian economy does that cover? Because a lot of work still is done through paper. You feel, here's another. I mean, this is two questions in one. One is what scope of the economy is covered by this, because most of it done on paper. When today, when you go to a bank, for example, or we go to a hospital, we fill out they make us fill out some documents in paper, and then they personally transfer it from that paper into a form on their computer. Does that mean that the data we gave them on that sheet of paper is not actually considered DPDP applicable?
No, so basically, if the data is collected on a physical format, but then subsequently it's digitalized, then it basically comes under the ambit of this regulation.
Okay. And what percentage of the Indian economy is covered by digital data collection and privacy rules?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? What percentage of that's a
Of the
tough
Indian
question.
economy? Yeah.
Indian economy.
Yeah.
So I mean, all the new age companies, the banking, financial services, insurance, telecom, most of the stuff, even if they are basically taking information on physical forms, they're subsequently basically digitalizing it, right? So I think majority of organizations are basically moving towards a digital first kind of approach.
Sorry, there was a little bit of noise, so I had to ask my son to close the door. Sorry about that. Right. So we're talking about digital privacy and BFSI, larger companies, which are anyway, they're going digital and they're going towards, coming under the ambit of DPDP. But what about, say, for example, I make a UPI payment to my, to the milk seller outside my house, and I'm doing digital payment, but they are maybe getting information about my transaction at their shop, their milk parlor. So what does that mean to DPDP, that this person also knows that my bank account has the last four digits of my bank account is such and such, my UPI and ID, I guess, is such and such. How do they know that? How does it impact them? Does the regulation fall on them in this regard?
So first of all, it's very important to know what does the government or what does the law DPDP basically define as personal data, right? So personal data is any information through which I can recognize who basically this you as an individual is, right?
Hmm.
Do I exactly know who Sai is by just knowing the last four digits of your bank account number? Maybe not, right? So then we have to be the law is very clear about you need like at least two attributes, right? Or two elements, right? It could be your sex, age, address, whatever, with which I can recognize that this is a natural person. I can pinpoint to a natural person that is only a personal data. Again, which is not personal data is out of scope of this regulation, right? So I mean, the regulator and all these big guys are not even going to come for manufacturing companies because they really don't even have too much data of customers, right? They're actually going to come behind the big guys who are taking data from individuals and using it for reasons for reasons which they shouldn't be using it. So there are a lot of other people the regulator is going to come in before that. So like even like a milkman or basically manufacturing company, they don't have a big exposure for data privacy right now, or at least for now.
Hmm. So you said they're looking at protecting data which can identify you as an individual, as in if people can combine multiple pieces of data and say this is Sai who's doing this transaction, that becomes a risk factor for anybody collecting those pieces of information. So
Correct.
are there any examples of this having actually happened and people getting impacted by their different pieces of information being collated and said, here's the individual, here's the group of individuals we are targeting? Has it happened in India?
I mean, in India, not in India, but in other, because India, the law hasn't come, there's not too much awareness of it yet. People haven't really taken a lot of people to court. But I'll tell you there was an instance with if anybody's ordered pizza from. So first let me explain, right? What does this law actually say? I think that will really give this the audience really a lot of some context of what we're actually talking about. So the law actually has about, I think, 8 pillars, right? What this law actually says is that when you are collecting customer data from the customer, you need to have explicit consent from the individual of how you're processing their data with a just-in-time privacy notice, which is not very legalese in 22 regional Indian languages, right? You need to basically exhibit all that first, right? Uh, that explicit consent has to basically be recorded with the organization. Okay. Now, earlier days, you would basically see a very detailed kind of a privacy policy, right? Too much legalese, which people will just scroll and basically give like a blanket kind of an consent. Now, the law very basically says that it has to be in regional languages, so everybody throughout India can understand that. It also has to be explicit. So basically, if you're saying for each use case, you basically have to have an individual tick mark, right? So people know what they're consenting for. That's number one. Number two is that if there is a data breach that basically happens in an organization, then they are supposed to let the regulator know and also let the individuals like you and me know that our data has been hacked and compromised. Basically, we can go ahead and do something about it, right? For example, if anybody basically has ordered pizza from Domino's, right, in India, that data has basically been compromised and hacked, but nobody even actually knows about it. So there's actually a website if you want to see if your data has been leaked or no. It's called MIPWNED. I'll put it on this chat. AMIPWNED. Just put your email address and phone number. You will see how many times your email and phone number has actually been leaked in the general internet, right? So once your data gets hacked, an organization knows that the data has got basically hacked. They're supposed to let the customers know within 72 hours so they can actually go ahead and basically make some changes in their passwords or whatever. So coming back to your question, right? Has there been any example? There was a set of users who who thought that their data had basically got hacked, right? And those people actually did a case in the court, and that's how they came up with the four definition point, and they said that okay, these were our points, and it actually got hacked. Data was found in the dark net, and that's how they went to the regulator as well. Not the regulator, the government as well. So there are a couple of cases from Domino's standpoint that are still pending in the court of law.
So you're saying that even buying your pizza, where you give your phone number and your email maybe for fulfilling the pizza order, can lead to your data being hacked and your data being leaked onto the dark web. Is that true?
Yes, so what I'm saying is that Domino's Pizza, right, had went through a data breach in the year 2017, 2018.
Hmm.
When all the data would basically been leaked on the dark net, right?
Hmm.
But when it got leaked, they didn't even bother letting the customers know that the data has actually got breached. And the reason is because India does not have any law that basically tells or mandates it that they should basically let the customers know that the data has got breached. With this new law coming into effect, they will basically have to let all customers know within 72 hours if there has been a breach.
So is there like a grading system that, here's a company, and maybe it's not maybe in India, but maybe in GDPR, I mean, EU and other sovereigns. Is there any grading system saying this company is extremely, open about the fact that it's been breached and it is transparent about its data privacy failures, and they get an A grade for that reason? And here is a company which has a C grade because they don't really are not transparent and they keep hiding things. And is there like how do you know, looking at a company, whether the company takes data privacy seriously or not? Like, I guess that's the bottom line question.
There's no scoring, but there are companies that I mean, end of the day, data privacy becomes more of a trust issue. More times there's no the regulator does not basically rate organizations saying that this is a good organization or this is a bad organization. It is just that organizations like people like you and me will feel more comfortable doing business with organizations that basically are more trustworthy with our data. They're very transparent with the data, right? So there's no uh, like a system grading system that the regulator has come up with yet. But
Hmm.
that's a great point, actually. I mean, they should probably do that, right? I mean, to rate organizations.
So if PrivEzi starts certifying companies on data privacy and you get a lot of business from that, some percentage of that revenue should come to me because I
Come to
gave
you,
you the
yeah.
idea. All right. So my next thought was, so there's Apple, which has made privacy like a core feature of the Apple ecosystem. They have been pushing it, they've been talking about it, they've been promoting it, and everybody at some level associates good privacy practices with Apple, but they're not doing it through the force of law. They're as a policy, they're orienting their stuff towards end-to-end encryption and keeping device data on the device and not taking it to the cloud. All those things they're doing. So is there like a movement towards ensuring more privacy and more guaranteeing less scope for breaches because the data is not even getting moved to the cloud, for example? So is there anything like that happening in the privacy world?
So right now, I think much more beyond. I think we are much more nascent than that. In India, organizations first of all need to know what data have they collected from the customers and where is it residing, right?
Mm.
Which is called like a simple data mapping or data inventory process, right? Because again, I'm going to come back to um why did this law actually get passed, right? Because the law actually, and any law, right, any data privacy law in any country primarily says that the data that uh, organizations hold of customers, they're just the custodians of the data. They don't own the data, right? The data is your data and my data, and we should basically have rights to exercise whatever we want to do with the data, right? And these are very simple rights, like right to access, which means like knowing what data does an organization hold about us. Like today, you might have given Swiggy about 10 data points about you, but they must have made about 500 data points about you, right? So when you do a right to access, you can raise a request saying what data you have about me, and they should be able to give you all the data that they have collected from you and also inferred from you, right? That's point number one.
Mm.
If there is no, if you wish to basically stop processing your data as long as there is no legal binding that the organization cannot stop processing your data. You should be able to put a stop to your data, right? Let's stop processing my data, and all this should basically happen within 30 days of you raising such request. If you want your data to get deleted, right? That delete my data. If there is no law that basically stops the organization from deleting the data, because sometimes there are a lot of IRDA regulations or whichever sectorial regulations there are, sometimes they cannot delete the data completely and they need to store the data for a certain amount of, retain the data for a certain amount of time. They will need to, they should be able to delete the data. So this is the main reason why why this law has come into effect, to give people like you and me control over the data that organizations have. So the number one, while you're talking about going into cloud and not to cloud, the main thing is organizations don't even know where their data is lying. It's
Mm.
some of them are on employees' laptops, some of them are on certain systems, and there is no legal basis also. In COVID times, we basically saw that organizations have basically gone and collected far much more information about individuals where actually they don't have any business model or any legal basis. They shouldn't be collecting the data. Like no organization should be basically having a fintech company shouldn't be having your live location or access to your phone book or your photos, right? There's no actual legal basis. But in India right now, since the rules have not got notified, when I say rules have not got notified, is that there's no deadline yet, right? I mean, we all know it might just come in by end of this year, but um, organizations take advantage of all these things, right? That because there's no law, then let's hold on to all the data that we can. So I think the question that you asked me was more from the cloud perspective, right? But I think one of India has never had a data privacy regulation, right? US and every country that you basically named has basically had some kind of data privacy regulation. Here, basically, there's a shortage of data privacy people, right? There's no awareness within the organization itself. So there is a lot of prerequisites that we basically need to do before we like actually jump into like the more complex perspectives on privacy in India.
So that brings us to an excellent segue into PrivEzi itself. You said there's a shortage of privacy personnel, people who can work with, who understand the law and understand the implications for a company. There's a lot of there's going to be a need for auditors. There's going to be a need for people who can locate and map data into a nice spreadsheet so that you know where the data sits. There's going to be a lot of uh, upskilling and upgradation of systems, because there needs to be a place where you can record a customer's request that please remove my data, and then you have to implement that removal. There's going to be a lot of work that goes into uh, upgrading Indian systems to match the what the law says. So do you see that as being a business advantage to you? Are you limited by scope? Are you limited by the availability of engineers to hire? Is AI going to help you scale up, because now you can just throw the rules at AI and say, given this company's data map, here's where tell me what you can do. So how are you seeing this evolve for your company?
So I'll take your first question first, right? Um, there's a certain role called a data protection officer that every organization basically needs to hire, right? This is a completely new role. What the role of the data privacy officer is basically to manage a data privacy program internally within the organization. Then is basically to manage requests that basically come from customers, grievance request, or all these requests that I spoke about earlier, right to deletion, right to access. It basically comes into the data protection officer. He might assign it to the right individual to action it within the organization, but he's the first person who receives the request, right? To understand it, to validate it, and to basically make sure. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that he's the one who will talk to the customer. And third thing he does is talks to the regulator when they come in for an annual audit. Now, this is a complete new role. We've never had any kind of data privacy kind of professional in India at all. And can you imagine every organization, especially or most of the BFSI, any organization that is significant data fiduciary, which basically churns large volume of data or data that is very sensitive in nature, they will definitely require a data protection officer. So all your fintechs, all your BFSI, are basically all your healthcare organization, hospitals are going to require a dedicated full-time data protection officer. And we don't have so many data privacy officers, privacy professionals. So right now, yes, there is a lot of reskilling and upskilling that is basically happening. We do also help organizations with DPO as a service, right? Where we offer DPOs till the time that they basically can hire a full-time data protection officer.
So is there a legal risk on the DPO? For example, if I take up a job as a DPO at some company and there is a breach or there is a problem and the compliance is low, so does that mean I could be taken to a court of law and personally be responsible for the outcome?
That's an amazing, great question. So I don't know if you're aware, but the Indian Data Protection Act has basically gone through a couple of iterations. We had the Data Protection Bill of 2019. then something in 2018 as well, so 2017 when it became a fundamental right, Puttaswamy judgment. So the earlier act basically had, some kind of repercussion, legal repercussions on the data protection officer, but then even when the new act basically came out, that basically clause was removed. Right? There are no legal liabilities on the data protection officer as of right now.
Hmm.
But
And
in the
are these-
earlier generation of the act and the bill, there was a legal consequence that the data protection officer could face.
Can you tell me two things? One is that is the DPO part of the C-suites, as in they can make executive level decisions, or are they still dependent on the executive to make a final decision and push some of the changes they're asking for? Is the DPO considered to be a C-suite officer? That's one. And the second thing is you talked about the Kuppaswamy judgment. Can you please explain that also? So the two questions.
Uh, So the data protection officer it needs to be an independent function, right? So globally, India basically has not basically has they don't have too much detail on if they can or they cannot hold dual roles. But globally, data protection officers cannot hold two roles. They cannot be a HR person and a data protection officer, or be a CTO, or be a CISO and be a data protection officer. They want them to be in completely independent function that reports directly into the board, right? Or
To the
any
board,
independent
not to the
function,
C-suite.
or an independent function like a risk and compliance, right? Uh, right. But so globally, like GDPR, it forbids you from having two roles. Indian law right now does not basically have too much clarity on that. That's why a lot of chief information security officers or legal professionals are basically wearing that dual hat. So ideally, like globally, usually legal people or risk and compliance are wearing that hat. In India, you see everybody wearing that hat right now, till there's more clarity from the law.
Right. And what is the Kuppaswamy judgment?
Puttaswamy judgment basically was the first judgment that was the first landmark judgment passed, which helped became the fundamental right in India.
And that was the first
Starting in
time.
2015, it became a fundamental right. Yeah.
Right. And one thing that I noticed in India is that there's a lot of collection of phone numbers. I mean, people don't need names anymore. Basically your phone number is your ID. And how's that going to evolve over time as the phone number becomes so tightly coupled? It's tied to your Aadhaar card, it's tied to your PAN, it's tied to your identity completely. So if you have your phone number, basically anybody knows who you are. So now how and they can within one hop they can know who you are. So how is DPDP and how is the Indian law looking at that aspect of Indian society where essentially a phone number is you? How is it and are there any examples of? I was reading about this recently on the internet that somebody's phone number got recycled, as in they had not paid their phone dues for 90 days and Airtel gave that same number to somebody else. So what started happening is that as soon as the second person started paying their bills, they started getting phone messages and information about the first person. They were able to the second person was able to log into the first person's Facebook account. They were able to get notifications about bank balances, all sorts of crazy things. And only because some private company like Airtel was recycling a number from one person to another person after 90 days of not paying bills. It's like, I think Airtel's rules are, I'm not, I'm telling you what I read on the internet. I don't know Airtel's rules on recycling SIMs, but they did recycle a phone number, and now the second person had full access to the first person's bank accounts and all that. So where does the Indian privacy thinking sit on this? Because phone numbers are fungible. I mean, people are going to change phone numbers every once in a while. Maybe not every day, but it is part of the life cycle of a phone number that it gets stopped. Especially, for
So I
example, if you
think
die. If you're dead, then your phone number gets recycled, and then your entire information goes to some other person.
Yeah, so basically in India, where we've taken one of the unique approaches is right to nomination as well, where basically individuals can basically nominate individuals in case of their death as well, right? But that's a separate topic. Coming back to your topic, the Indian law does not basically primarily call out phone numbers itself. As I mentioned, any information that can basically tell me who a natural person is, right? It could be a phone number, or it could be address, it could be email address, anything. that's all considered under a blanket personal identifiable information. It does not have any specific about a phone number itself. So right now, what we have is basically a skeleton, right? A skeleton of law, which is about 24 pages, right? And it's going to evolve because this is the first stab that the government has actually taken of the regulation. So it's going to evolve over the period of time. The example that you actually took is a great example, and I think it's more uh, a cyber hygiene issue, right? If you know if you haven't paid your bills, then you need to really go and change your phone numbers from all the places where you have put in the. So I think that awareness has to really set in where people really need to know all these things, right? And need to change their passwords on a regular basis if they basically think there's a risk. In this case, the phone number itself basically was changed, right? So
Right. And there is what's that company which looks at your phone book and says, I forget what the name. You can if I call a stranger who doesn't know me, it'll tell you who I am and
Truecaller.
Yeah, exactly, Truecaller. I forgot the name of the company. So that sounds like it's a serious data privacy issue because anybody, if my number is saved as, say, a bad person, I'm somebody, say some two or three people say my number as a hacker or someone who steals other people's money, and they call under my name, they say put scammer under my name, which means that any Truecaller person will be like, oh yeah, this guy, anybody I call, they'll be like, this person is a scammer. So how is that not a privacy issue? How are companies like Truecaller even surviving?
So basically, a lot of these companies in India, so I'll tell you a little bit about the act and the law and the rules in India. So in India, on August 11th, 2023, data privacy became a fundamental act. That means it's become an act, it's become a law. Now there's something called as a sunrise period, right, which organizations will get to comply, so organizations have since then started to basically work on data privacy and start working on it, right? While because in the country basically needs to make a board, a regulator, all these things. In the last budget session, the budget basically got announced. What I'm trying to say is that it takes time for the government to basically make the regulator. And now the last leg is that the rules will tell organizations how much time do they actually have to comply? Maybe 6 months, maybe 1 year, right? And that rules is going to come out very soon, right? So it's not enforceable yet because the government has not basically given them a deadline yet. Because of this, there's no deadline yet. Uh, a lot of organizations actually taking advantage of that, right? I'll come to the true collar example, but if you take all the organizations, like even like Meta, they have different privacy policies in different parts of the world, but they have different privacy policies in India because they know that there is no regulation just as yet. When it comes into effect, they will change it, right? And the example for that is that without your explicit consent, they cannot be sharing data between WhatsApp, Facebook, and all the different applications that they basically have. They need explicit consent before they actually, even if it's metadata. Metadata is data about the data. They cannot be sharing that without the customer's consent, right? And in India, they basically do that because the law has not come into effect. So Truecaller also, in what I believe is that in most of the other countries, you basically have to register, and if you don't consent to it, then your name will not even appear on Truecaller, right? In India, basically, it doesn't matter. As long as you have a phone number, you will appear on Truecaller.
Mm.
You
So,
will
so,
only have more control if you're a gold member on Truecaller, I
so
think.
you pay for privacy then. Basically, you pay Truecaller some
Yeah, yeah,
money.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
That's
So
sounds.
that's a joke. Now they say privacy is a fundamental right, but if you don't have money, then that fundamental right you'll be stripped away from that fundamental right.
Yeah, it sounds exactly like that. And Indians, for some reason, Indian society has a very easygoing approach to privacy. Why is that? And from a social perspective, what was it that? Why is it that Indians don't care? What is the like? Oh yeah, my data is anyway getting hacked. So what's the big deal? Do you see that changing with all these laws coming in, or is law being enforced on a society which just doesn't really care?
Yeah, that's a great question again, right? I mean, I think as privacy as we don't have privacy in our culture. We like to overshare. Like even if you go to an ATM machine, right? Uh, the other guy will come right behind your back to basically like to a point that can make you really feel uncomfortable, right? Or people kind of, if you're opening a letter somewhere, also people kind of will sneak in. I mean, that culture is not there, or maybe we overshare also. Okay, my son did this, my daughter did this. We have like a uh, I think only in metropolitan cities, and I think a certain class of people, there's a lot of privacy. But otherwise, people love to overshare in India. There's privacy is not been there as part of our culture, right? And I think compared to like Europeans or Americans, this is much more a private society, right? It's a cultural thing also,
So is that
I
because there
feel.
we don't have any money anyway? So what's the risk of loss? So I mean, if I have 100 rupees in the bank and I lose my privacy and somebody goes and takes that 100 rupees, what am I? I mean, I would think that that a society which is not very wealthy, where that every resource that you have needs to be protected, would be more like privacy focused than say a country which is wealthier and they have like, okay, I have one bank account here, but if that bank account gets money from that account gets stolen, I have 10 other accounts where I have 10 other volumes of money. Why is it that?
But but it's not only about like banking account numbers, right? I mean, organizations exactly know. Let's take, for example, simple examples of you going to a website and trying to shop. Once you because they put such intrusive cookies and third-party uh, pixels on your website browsers, that after you log out of that website, and when you're actually doing stuff on other website, that earlier website actually knows exactly what you're doing. You know what time are you buying stuff, what are you what time are you, what is your browsing pattern. They made a persona out of you. So it's not only, I think, financial transactions, it's like intrusive kind of behavior that organization basically has made a persona of you, and then they use it against you to basically lure you into buying stuff or whatever that the objective of the organization is, right?
So we are willing to for free, we're willing to give away privacy in return for free stuff. Because I know I have some friends who are like, I don't care about YouTube ads because I'm not paying for YouTube and I'm not willing to pay for YouTube. So I'm okay with YouTube tracking me across mobile devices, across YouTube, Google, and Google's other products, Gmail, everywhere, simply because I'm giving away privacy in return for free stuff. Is that culture, is that a like a limitation in Indian thinking that we're not going to pay for privacy, we're not going to pay for our right to not get cheated and fleeced?
Um, I think that the awareness is happening. People are changing. Like a lot of people are basically paying for YouTube Premium as well now, right? Because they don't want to. Uh, Either you pay for us, you pay for premium, or you basically listen to ads, right? Those ads will definitely be more personalized, something that Sai likes, right? Or maybe they think that you might really buy.
Hmm.
But yeah, that shift is coming up slowly and slowly, right? If you
So I
can.
want to tell you a story because of late I've been seeing ads about reading more books. I'm like, did you really think that I don't read enough? So that's why like go read more books. So I don't know. Maybe Google knows more about me than I would expect because I don't pay for YouTube Premium, and I've been noticing ads saying if you read one book a week, you can read 52 books in a week in a year, and you'll become a better reader. And this that. I'm like, dude, I don't want to be told that. I don't want to be reminded of my limitations as a reader. I'm not reading enough. I know that already. So yeah, that's great. So privacy as a concept in Indian society still has some way to go, and you're there. Like you're already at the forefront. Your company's at the forefront of helping uh, companies and larger organizations comply with the upcoming rules. There's a sunrise period, so you have some runway. You have maybe a year, 2 years before the law becomes hard, and you have to be compliant after that point onwards. So let's talk about that period when after say 2027, 2028, when it becomes a hard requirement for companies. Where do you see Indian businesses, your business, for example, you are in that I'm helping companies reach compliance, and now there'll be a stage when your company has the compliance is there, and of the BSE company, those listed companies, say 90% of the listed companies are compliant. Where does your business go from there? Like, does is privacy is it done and dusted, and your company no longer needs to exist because all the work is done, or do you see it surviving? And where do you see Indian economy itself becoming maturing after the laws change and we can't do some kinds of business like Truecaller cannot exist in India in its current form after 2027? So what is some of those future changes that you expect because of these laws?
Great question again, Sai. So data privacy, data protection, data governance, these are the, I think, building blocks for AI as well, right? AI governance. Uh, and unless and until you don't have great hygiene of data governance in your organization, you will not be able to do some kind of AI governance as well, right? So now GDPR came with so EU came with GDPR back in 2018, and now they have basically one of the first country to basically come up with EU AI Act, right, which basically makes sure that that the AI that organizations are basically using does not harm the freedom and rights of individuals like you and me. Just like how data privacy, now it's AI governance, right? So most of the organization and the industry, the regulator, everybody has basically moved to that direction because most of the organizations within Europe have certain kind of baseline for data privacy, GDPR. And now they're basically moving on to AI governance. So India also just the same way. Though we are ahead of the curve, we have just, I think 2 weeks back, India came up with their own AI governance framework as well, which basically talks about how what are the things that organizations basically need to do to make sure that like for example, there are many things, right? Like biases. When you apply for a loan, make sure that certain people from certain, underprivileged kind of neighborhoods are not at a disadvantage. So there are no biases or ethics, or not one kind of a gender is basically disregarded, right? So all these biases are not there. It's very ethical in nature, the way it works. And again, you have to have governance over that, right? Then you need to make sure that the AI does not basically hallucinate a lot. And how do you do that? By making sure that you have data from uh, you know different data points, that you have consent for all of them, that the data is factual, what sources it comes from, then you have validation, then you have human reporting. So all these basically I mean, this kind of governance and regulation is just like as cumbersome as any privacy regulation. So most of the companies who are privacy companies now, you will see them evolving into AI governance companies.
So you're seeing PrivEzi also going from being a data protection and data compliance and data governance company to being a company which also assists the implementation and adoption of AI in the future. So that is the way.
No, AI governance. Yeah, we're talking about AI governance, making
AI
sure that
governance.
AI governance, not the adoption of governance, but making sure that the AI that has been adopted by the deployer, developer, and the organization that's using it is basically working without harming the rights and freedom of individuals, right?
Understood.
And unless and until you don't have data governance, uh, data privacy and data governance in place, you cannot build a AI governance layer on top of it. So what I'm trying to say is that data privacy, data protection is basically a prerequisite for AI governance. To
Right.
answer your question, most of the organizations in my industry will basically pivot into or already started moving into AI governance.
All right. Interesting. That sounds like a fascinating evolution. I didn't think that.
I'm sure you read about the EU AI Act, right? Already or no?
I've heard
EU.
about it. I haven't read much about it though. I know
Yeah.
less
So it
about it than
basically
the GDPR, for example.
Yeah, so EU AI Act basically talks about just all the things that we just spoke about. But there's no way that you can basically have AI governance program without a data privacy program. So data privacy program basically is like the bedrock that all the data that has been collected is legally collected, and so on and so forth.
But so if I have given you my data as a customer of yours, as a BFSI customer, I've given my data to State Bank of India. I have willingly consented to giving you data for doing basic banking transactions with me. But now a State Bank of India wants to implement an AI layer on top of that and use my data to say design a model which figures out whether giving small business loans to people like me makes sense or not, and without involving a person. They can use an AI model for that. Now, do I then have to come and tell State Bank of India that I, as an individual, consent to my data being used to train an AI model, all that stuff?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
very
yeah.
cool.
You need explicit consent for that as well.
All right. So I'm excited to hear all this, that India is on the uh, leading edge of privacy first, because I mean, there's obviously big markets, China, US, EU, India. I'm sure Africa will have its own set of rules coming up over time. I'm excited to hear that India is leading the charge on that, and also that the future for privacy is not going to end once the rules come into place and compliance becomes law of the land and everybody starts complying. There's also after that there's going to be AI and an entire alternate economy is going to come, which is the AI economy, which will need its own. The data collected now will feed into that economy and we'll have regulations around that. Now we have some guests who are not from India. We have guests who joining in from Malaysia and other countries. Now my question was going to be around that I think GDPR's big innovation was that EU laws, and actually I have two questions. The first innovation was that EU laws are applicable if your data touches EU citizens outside the EU also. Does Indian DPDP also touch and apply globally? That's one.
Yes. So it doesn't matter where a organization is residing, but if you're targeting Indian citizens, right, regardless of their own location, then they need to basically comply with this regulation. What this means is that if there's a US company that's targeting Indian citizens, then they need to comply with this regulation.
Okay. So now, because of that, the question of innovation comes in because I know in the AI space, a lot of EU startups are really frustrated because GDPR is so hard to navigate or to get around that they're not able to create models which are innovative and cutting edge in the EU. All the EU AI engineers are moving to the US or China or Australia, places which are more lax about privacy. And so that's according to the people who are EU citizens, they feel EU is losing the AI race because GDPR was in place and they're not able to innovate. Are you imagining the same thing happening in India as well? Because as the laws become more and more stringent, I mean, I know
No,
privacy is important, but so is innovation. So where do you see that trade-off happening?
so India is very clear. I think great point again, Sai, that India is very clear that they do not want to basically hamper innovation and basically just have a truckling kind of a regulation as well, right? So they want to have a complete balancing act. They want to do responsible innovation. So if you don't innovate, then you're basically going to be left behind, as you mentioned, right, in the AI race. So India basically wants to take a pragmatic approach. They don't want to have like a full-blown kind of a regulation that stops startups and organizations from innovating as well. At the same time, they want to have some kind of guardrails, right? And hence they're basically, first gonna come up with the DPDP Act, and then they're gonna come up with the AI governance framework and framework act. And in that much time, I think India will have enough of lessons to learn from the rest of the world as well, right? Because I think Europe, California, all these have their own AI governance frameworks already in place. So we'll have enough time to learn from the mistakes that these organizations, these countries make, and then implement what is best for us, right, for this economy, which is so diverse in nature.
Understood. So you're saying that since India will have experience, since India is aware of the fact that innovation can get stifled with overregulation.
Yeah, very much. India has taken that approach. Actually, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, they've written that also in the governance framework that they want to have the AI governance framework in a matter of way that it balances innovation and uh, at the same time does not basically hamper the rights and freedom of individuals and customers.
All right. On that note, I'm going to open this conversation up to our guests. I know it's been a very, very technical conversation. It's about privacy and law and stuff that I don't know how many people are going to be like, oh yeah, this is exciting to me. To me, it's exciting because I was in the software engineering domain, so it was interesting to me, and it's also uh, encouraging to me that the Indian framework setters have thought about innovation. They don't want to stifle innovation. They don't want to lose any upcoming races that we might have. And I'm also excited to see that there is an entire marketplace and need for upskilling and new degree and programs in privacy and data management and data modeling and all those really, really interesting aspects of privacy. It's exciting to me, but I want to open it up to the audience. And if you have any questions, any conversation points that from your perspective we want to talk about, please go ahead and unmute yourself, turn on your video if you can, and ask away. I'm sure Ibrahim will be more than happy to answer them. And if I've not asked some question that you want to ask, please ask. Prem, go ahead.
Hey, hi, good morning, namaste.
Hi.
I was following the conversation a bit late, right, because I had some chores to do in the house. But when I came in, I was really intrigued. The banter between you and Sai. So, I'm 67, a real dinosaur. So I'm trying to catch up with what is innovative out there, what is happening. My friends, my colleagues who are of my age group, sometimes I find that they are very intimidated. They don't want to keep up with the times. They feel, oh, we are okay where we are. I say, no, no, we got to go out there and understand what's happening. I mean, you cannot remain at the back. You have to be in the forefront. Otherwise, things are happening which we won't have. So my question here, or my observation, at least in Malaysia where I live, there's not much of how would I say? I don't want to sound critical, but there's no friendly approach for us seniors to educate us. I don't know why. Uh, because I will give an example. I won't mention names, but there was a prime minister before. He was very concerned about the lack of English. So English competency was lacking. So he created an avenue for youngsters to come in. So I asked them, and I said, how about me? I'm old timer. Can I come in? They say, sure, why not? So I registered myself. So I'll go for my classes. Mostly was live classes. We didn't have any online classes. It was everything there. So I greatly benefited, and I'm very thankful that I could catch up, brush up my English. And I wish the same could be done for us, seniors, as far as IT knowledge is concerned. Otherwise, we are not on the same page with the youngsters. Today, I observe what's happening even in my own house. I see what my kids are doing, right? When I say my kids, they're not really my biological kids, but they're my kids. So I wish they would balance. They will balance, seek a balance. I cannot seek the balance for them. They have to seek the balance for themselves. It's their life.
Right.
And I am hampered by this lack of knowledge that I have to be empathic towards the other generation. My son is the e-games champion of his school. Okay, that's good. But where's the balance on the other side? Yeah.
Okay.
He's got major exams around the corner. And he's e-gaming. So many things are going on.
So
And I don't understand.
maybe I can set the context and then Ibrahim can add anything he wants to it. I think
Sure.
one of the innovations on the privacy front that India is introducing to the world is the concept of a digital nominee, a person who can be your champion when it comes to technology and privacy and all those aspects. So if you are not aware of what's available, where the technology is going, what's available in the technical space, you can always nominate someone else to be your spokesperson, so to speak, your representative. So that's one thing that maybe Malaysia could adopt. That there could be some, you even if you don't know it, somebody else knows it on your behalf and helps you navigate that. That's one
Yeah.
option. And in terms of your kid being an e-games champion versus having exams coming up, I mean, kids are going to be kids. You're not going to change that much. Ibrahim, more from your side if you want to add.
No, I think there's not too much that I can add to this, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of self learning that you can do for free of cost also. And I'm happy to drop some notes to Sai later on, but if you want to just learn and as you kept talking about like learning and keeping up to date, and you don't want to be at the back of things and you want to keep learning. So I mean, as long as you take an initiative yourself or your son takes an initiative, you should be able to manage there's a lot of material out there that's really that I also personally use sometimes, right? That all of us use, that is really out there. Uh, it doesn't cost anything, and as long as you have an intent to basically keep upgrading yourself.
And to add to what Ibrahim just said, I would strongly encourage you to go to primary sources for insights. For example, your Malaysian government websites or documents put out by the, say, responsible authorities and not interpreted information. For example, if you watch a YouTube video explaining DPDP, or GDPR, or any technical topic, that is one person's interpretation, and you never know whether that person's acting in good faith, or are they
Yeah.
adding noise to the conversation. So my personal advice to my parents, for example, and to I would rather go to a primary source, even if you do it at a later stage. You go to the YouTube, understand what technology is available to you, and then once you understand a little bit more, you go to the primary source to read more about it, learn more about it. I think that's probably the safest approach. You have to be a little proactive, like Ibrahim says, but the proactivity has to be directional, that you have to go from secondary to primary sources, and then I'm sure everybody's smart. They'll figure out what works correctly, what is the correct answer here. So I think I would say.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Anybody else has any thoughts to share? Please go ahead. All right. Looks like everybody has all their questions answered. I'm really grateful for everyone for being part of this discussion on a pretty technical topic, but important topic, because you cannot wish away privacy. You cannot wish away
I think
technology.
Sai Meena ji has.
Oh, sorry. I didn't realize. I didn't complete. I'm so sorry about that. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Sai. This is
Yeah.
Meena. I joined late, so can you give us a quick recap in simple English, or just what we went through, because I missed. I am going to watch the YouTube link later, and then
Yeah.
I may have a question, I may not have. But whatever you have spoken with the speaker, could you please give us a recap and like something in a short gist?
All right. Absolutely. So
Thank
technology, human society has been existing a certain way for thousands of years, and then technology comes in, and technology makes the collection of data and sharing of data very simple. Now, as the first 20 years of technology evolved in a certain way, there was very few rules, and then EU decided that the data that's being collected for individuals needs to be protected, and individuals have a right to that data. They made that a fundamental right, and they created rules saying that if you're a EU national, you have certain rights over your data that are global in nature. So any company interacting with you needs to follow those rules and protect your data on your behalf. So that was the EU's innovation. And now India is also doing similar rules. They're creating similar rules around how the companies which access your data and work with your data have to comply with certain expectations that Indian citizens have a right to, about how you manage your data. For example, your data needs to, if there is any information about you which can be used to identify you individually, for example, your phone number or your name is, they can connect those two and say, this is Sai I'm talking about. That data is considered sacred and needs to be protected. Because of that, and those rules, the law has been passed, but the rules around that are still evolving and still being framed, which is where Ibrahim's company, our speaker's company, comes into play. They help companies navigate that journey from never having any rules on them to reaching a stage where they're compliant and they respect Indian laws and are in a position to respond to concerns about privacy and that an individual might have. Overall, that's what the conversation was about. Of course, there are nuances that I might have missed. Ibrahim, anything that you want to add clarity on?
I think that, and we also just touched upon what the law actually talks about and what rights, the law basically gives common people, citizens, right, to act upon their own data. It gives you rights to basically correct your data, delete your data, or it gives you a lot of rights that right now organizations actually don't have. So customers don't have, right? So it empowers the customers to basically operationalize the data that organizations hold about them.
Right. And one extra thing that I didn't mention is that India has taken a different approach than EU. EU has made the law so stringent that innovation is getting hampered, but the Indian system is trying to balance innovation with obviously data protection and your privacy. So that's the nuance over there between the EU system and the Indian system. And most big economies are working towards data protections. And yeah, one more thing is that because data protection is becoming foundational, it is going to feed into how the next economic cycle, which is going to be AI driven, will be agentic, and there'll be AI products talking to each other on your behalf, or making decisions that impact your life. How will they have to be modeled and created? Because they should reflect how society actually works, and that's where privacy comes into play as well. So, Minu, I hope that was a good summary of what we discussed. Meena, sorry, not Meena.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate. Really good help to me. Also, okay, if there is any wrong or mismatched data, so that can be corrected too. I don't know if I missed in your conversation or just a quick question. Like if there is, like if you Google search somebody, sometimes it gives accurate information, sometimes there is no information about that person at all. And is Google also connected with that? Anything in Google search also, like we are searching anything on website, so that is also data, right? The cookies and all that goes.
That's a fantastic
Yes,
question.
absolutely.
Ibrahim, go ahead.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
There is a
cookies.
site that it can be corrected also, or it's still work in progress?
That's what Ibrahim will be telling
Sorry?
us. Is there a place to correct any inconsistencies in the data? Can you request that your data be corrected or removed or something like that?
So you can actually, if depending upon who is basically has wrong information about you, right? So you can go to that individual itself uh, and basically ask them to collect the data. If they do not basically collect your data, so most of the regulations in the world, privacy regulations in the world, give you a 30-day to maximum 60-day period to basically settle that with the organization that has incorrect data about you. In case they don't collect it, then you can basically take it to the lower court. They have a separate lower court, most of the countries, right? The regulator. And you can, and there are huge fines associated with it, right? So till now, if you take the global best practices, most of the organizations really act upon this, right? So in India, there's a fine of up to 50 crores. That's about, how much is that? That's about 5 million US dollars at least, right? For not basically respecting uh, the request that comes in from customers.
And Meenaji, to answer your question about Google, I think Google has a right to be forgotten. They have, at least maybe not in all jurisdictions, but many jurisdictions implement or enforce the right to be forgotten, which means that if you asked Google to delete all the data they have about you, they will comply with it. So that's one option if you feel the data is incorrect about you or about any individual. But whether they correct misleading information about you, for example, if I write something about you which is misleading, and it becomes part of your Google search. When people search for Meena, they see stuff that I've written incorrectly about you. Then you probably cannot tell Google to remove that unless you go through the courts. But you can tell me directly under DPDP. If you tell me that, listen, your information about me is incorrect and that's impacting my Google result about me, then if I'm in India and I'm adhering to the DPDP, then I will be required to correct that information about you. I think that's what Ibrahim's summary is.
Yeah, just wanted to say, I was asking on behalf of XYZ, not me. Thank God everything is clear and I'm aware of that and I'm educated enough. But, thank God for that. But, once anybody says Meena about you, it becomes like it's about me. But actually, I was talking on behalf of many people. On their behalf, I was asking XYZ. I don't have their name. It was just a like spur of a moment question cropped up on their behalf. So I was asking that. But when it is in a way, Meena, if you have this record, I became little on the spot, so I was little concerned. It was looking like personal thing.
You cannot tell other people to fix data about some third party. I mean, that's doesn't make any sense for me to go and say.
No. The question was on behalf of, like, this may crop up in other people's mind, and I was being representative in asking this.
Okay, understood.
That's
all right.
Thank you.
It's 9:10. It's been a long conversation, and I'm really happy that our guests were also able to ask a few questions that came to their mind. Shabana, is there any other question that anybody has?
Not right now, but yeah, many people, one question from my side, like recently I've seen many people email got hacked, and I also experienced my Facebook account got hacked, and then somehow Facebook removed the entire data. And because I was not using it, I got to know after 6 months. So then nothing that I could do about the entire data set, because I had a long friend list and all of it. So in that case, because someone else hacked the profile, and then and I also know one of my teachers' email ID got hacked. So we recurrently receive emails like, okay, send money and this and that. So the person, of course, cannot do much because someone else, third party, is doing. But at the same time, these big major giant like Google or Facebook are involved. So people don't necessarily find very comfortable to go to the court and run the case and all of it. So what is the easiest way to handle these kind of things?
I mean, the first line of defense should be the local authority, right, where you report cyber crimes. I think we're talking mostly towards from a uh, you know, somebody who's trying to impersonate you and basically hack into your account and then basically ask other people money once they have access
Even
into
in
your account,
WhatsApp,
ask you for money.
yeah, in WhatsApp, lots of people are getting, messages in recent last few months. I received quite a few messages from different people. Okay, send money like that. So yeah, that is also becoming common.
So Shabana, I want to distinguish between data privacy, which is what Ibrahim is an expert in, versus cybercrime, which is how do you steal data and then use it to, I guess, for financial benefit. So I want to clarify that I'm not sure if Ibrahim will be able to help you guide you through any cybercrime related conversations, but I guess 1930 is the number to call if you've been hacked. You can escalate it from there. But
Yeah.
we've had a previous conversation with funnily enough, with a person who's an expert in cybercrime.
Yes.
So we can always direct for that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you do put complaint on now even those where you have to complain, they are also digital, so you can put the complaint online, but you never know if something is happening out there.
That's true. That we
So
don't know.
where all the data is going.
True. But I think the first thing you should do is there's this website that Ibrahim mentioned, haveibeenpawned.com, where you give them your email and they'll keep checking the dark web and all those places to see if your email and password and all those things are being sold on the dark internet. But that's a cybercrime part of data privacy. We're focusing on what companies need to do today. And for that, I'm really grateful for the time Ibrahim took to talk to us about it and make us more aware of our rights and privileges as Indian nationals to go ahead and ask for better treatment of our data from the companies which have the resources to do it, frankly. So, Ibrahim, thank you so much for the time you spent with us.
Thank you, Sai. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Shabana. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
And all the best to PrivEzi, because you guys are on a cusp of a big thing, a big new industry coming up. So all the best to you guys also.
Thank you. Thank you, Sai.